In this video, we'll start to take a look at time and change over time and how to visualize that in Tableau. In your book, we go over a series of these types of visualizations, and it's very common to try to be asked to do time analyses. And quite often the questions we are asked is, how can we create a visualization, or can we create a visualization for our data consumers that examines change over time? Are things getting better? Are they getting worse? Or are things increasing? Are they decreasing? Is there a correlation? So as time goes on, does one variable change while the other remains constant? And these are quite common. Also, are there certain variations that we see at specific times, or seasonality? So for example, you would expect to see seasonality in the New York City trash department collecting Christmas trees in January, and you would expect to see that. You're not going to see them recording the collection of Christmas trees or the disposal of Christmas trees in July. So, that being said, we'll start looking at change over time. And the first example we see in the book, once again, goes back to what was the national pastime, baseball. And one of the reasons it's been a go-to is because you have a number of widely available public data sets. And while sometimes we could use other types of data sets, those data sets often contain proprietary information or other person identifiable information that becomes more difficult to use as a practice. So let's take a look at baseball, and we'll go through the example that you see in your book, which starts off measuring the strikeouts over time, an increase in strikeouts over time, using a simple line chart. So first thing we'll do is connect to our data source here in Tableau. And we've got the strikeouts. And we'll be using sheet 1, so we drag sheet 1 over to the stage. Go to worksheet 1. Okay. So, very simply, we take our measure strikeouts, and we have a number of measures here, SO strikeouts, and we can put them here in rows. We can take year, put it into columns, and this is the line chart we see. So we see this chart's our strikeouts, average strikeouts per year from 1871 through 2012. And what we see is that there are fluctuations. So for example, strikeouts really grow in 1884, between 1873 and 1884, and then they go down precipitously and start to rise again, but they don't hit that same point until 1957. So there is quite a bit of time between there. And then all of a sudden they climb. We have this incredible moment here in 67 and 68, and boom, we start to see another decline again. And we also see the rise of strikeouts yet again to levels that are unprecedented. So we can already convey quite a bit of information in this pattern. So we have that increasing trend, and we can even show that very simply. If we go to analytics, we can show a trend line. So we do what we've been doing. We drag our trend line, and we drag it to linear, and we see our trend line. We can even make a forecast on this and try to drag forecast over and add a forecast. And so based on these trends, what we see is a forecast through 2030, the estimate at this pace, you're seeing quite an estimate of strikeouts. So somewhere around here on the trend line. So if all things remain equal, this is the forecast. We'll get back to forecast later in the course. So we have our trend line. We see these things. And we see that the rate of increase here. So we see that there's been an increase of 0.033 strikeouts per year, or per game each year on average. So that's the increase in strikeouts, and we see that that's grown over this period of time. But there are departures, and so you might want to mark them in your visualization. So in the early days of baseball, the rules changed quite a few times. So for example, in the early days of baseball, the role of the pitcher was even different. The pitcher's job was to put the ball in play. It wasn't necessarily to strike out batters. So that wasn't even a major focus for a hitter. And in fact, batters would request their pitches be high or low. There wasn't a non-swinging strike rule. It was supposed to be what you would call a gentleman's game. So you would request pitches, and as a gentleman, if you couldn't hit it within so many, you would sit down and retire yourself. So swinging strikes were called. So what we start to see is also changes in the rules. There's also, by the 1890s, what we see is that through here, the 1880s, and then into the 1890s, we start to see that the mound here, by the way, by the 1890s, the mound got moved further back. And then you see a massive drop-off in strikeouts. So pitchers had to throw the ball from a farther distance, 60 feet, 6 inches now. So you could make little markers here to designate these critical changes, right? So in 1887, we see that rule about requesting pitches changes. And so for that season, we see a drop-off in strikeouts there. We also see that in 1969, we see that rise through the 50s and 60s in strikeouts. One of the other critical changes in baseball that happened was that after an incredible season by the great pitcher Bob Gibson in 1968, as well as Denny McLain, who pitched for the Tigers, in 1969, the pitcher's mound was lowered, and the size of the strike zone shrunk. So it made it more difficult for pitchers to strike out hitters. So hitters gain an advantage, and you see strikeouts go down. And then what we also see is that in 1981, strikeouts started to go up again, and that's due to a few things. And we can actually drop lines. So if we wanted to drop lines at these credible markers here, or these little markers, you just insert a reference line. And then I would put, for year, a reference line per pane. And I want the constant. And then I take the value, and I can write 1969. And I can write here in the label, I can make custom. And in that label, I can write so the mound was lowered and the strike zone shrunk. So we have there. I also So I've got my trend line. I've reset my x-axis to start in 1870, which is right before my first year of data. It runs through 2020. I can also set another one by saying, other major changes. So we know in 69 they made that rule change. We know there's another rule change, so I can drop another reference line here. And once again, it's on year. And we know that same deal. We're looking at constant. We're looking at 1887. And the label will be custom. And we'll say that in 1887, we'll say strike rules enforced. So that was the introduction of the rules for strikeouts. So your batters could no longer just request where pitches go. And we see that strikeouts go up to about 1888, and it starts to fall down. And what happens around then? We can introduce another reference line into year. And once again, same thing. So we'll have constant, year, and in this case, I believe it's 1890. Custom, and mound moved back 60 feet, 6 inches. To 60 feet, 6 inches. And so what we'll see is that as the mound moved back, the strikeouts dropped off. But the point is you can make that pretty revealing. And so now we've added our vertical reference lines. We've added our trend line. We can also try to examine some more about 1981, because what we see in 1981, right here, right, all of a sudden, boom, we have this takeoff in strikeouts. So what happened? So one of the things I also know about 1981 is that we see more teams being added and more teams carrying more pitchers, and you have more specialization of pitching. And so one theory is that with more people, with more fresh arms on the team, you have basically pitchers having a better advantage over batters overall. And so let's take a look at any correlations between these. So let's take a look. First thing we do is we take our data, and we need to create a calculated field. We're looking to see how many pitchers per team are there, and that's an easy calculated field. So we can just write pitchers per team. And go here. Sum. And I want the number of pitchers, which is the number pitch here. And I want to divide that by sum. And there, the number of teams. And where's the number? And so the number of teams would be here. So we have our new calculated value, and I take pictures per team, and I drag that to rows. So now I've added a second chart. And what I want to do is overlay these to make a combination chart, right? A dual axis chart. So what we can do here is click in the ag pictures, right, per team, and dual axis. And so now we'll see that we have a trend line for each each measure here, each row. So we have the strikeouts and the pitchers per team. And we see that as the pitchers per team tends to grow, so do the number of strikeouts. So how do we clean this up? One of the ways is, well, we have colors. We might want to say, oh, well, you know, our Ks, our strikeouts, we might want to color red. So we can also go here in our marks for strikeouts, for color. We might edit the colors and say for strikeouts, let's make that red. And for pitchers per team, we can make that a nice, well, we'll leave it at blue. Okay. We can also right-click on the axis here, and we can format this. We can change the font if we want. I want to make it bold, and I think I want to make it red to match the color of the line. So we have that. That's been done. I want to do the same here. Format. And I want to make this one here. We've got font, but I want to make this bold, and I want to make this blue. Okay, so I've done that. If I want to rename this, what I might want to do is edit my axis, and right here, I can change the title to Strikeouts. There we go. So we've got the strikeouts, we've got the labels, okay? And so that is how we make a basic line chart that examines change over time with an overlay. And you've done this already a bit in the course. You've already done dual axis visualizations. So here's another way of doing it with time as a major factor. So in the next video, we'll take a look at maybe a better way of making this visualization with the connected scatter plot.